The Grand River Canoe and Kayak Race. It was raining cats and dogs all day long. It had been raining all night before and started raining hard before we started the race, so I was pretty well soaked before I ever got in the river. Fortunately, dry suits are cool. They said there were 258 people registered, and I'm guessing pretty darn close to all of them showed up for this, even with the weather dependent. This was my first attempt at kayaking and moving water since my injury, my dislocated shoulder over a year ago. So I'd been in pools a couple of times, and I've been out on West Branch a little bit. We're getting ready to move now. We're coming up to the start line. I didn't figure out until later that I was going to have water spots all over the GoPro, so I lost quite a bit of footage, but some of it turned out pretty decent. They gave us a timing start, and then they were shooting us off three paddlers every minute. So, a lot of wreck boats. I was one of only maybe two whitewater boats I saw there. I saw another, looked like a Liquid Logic remix, either an XP9 or an XP10. So, it's almost ready to go. Vicky and the kids had dropped me off here, and then they went to the other side of the river. There'll be some pictures and some video from their side later. It was pretty muddy. And some pictures from the other side of the river. I had a slight equipment malfunction when I got in the water. I was intending to leave the stern on shore enough to get my skirt on, get my seat adjusted, get my skirt on and set. Well, as you can kind of see here, because it was so muddy and so slippery, as soon as I put my butt in the boat, I started to slid right into the water. And I got my seat adjusted, tried to get the skirt on, but then I started catching current. So paddle started slipping, and it was over from there. I finally just decided that I was going to paddle a little bit. The boat was already full of water from the rain, so it wasn't really preventing anything. So I just decided to start moving, get myself downriver a little bit, and find a spot where I could either catch an eddy or where I could get on a little piece of beach or something and get my equipment adjusted. That's another picture from the other side of the river. So I was still, this is still before I was able to get my skirt on. I tried adjusting midstream, but there's a decent amount of current in this section. There's a low head dam just upstream, and there's a short series of little waves right near the put-in. I dropped the skeg, but I don't know for sure that it actually dropped. I retracted it at one point downriver when I was about to hit some smaller rapids, and then when I tried to redeploy it, it wouldn't drop. So I'm thinking I picked up either mud, rocks at the put-in. So with the skeg, this boat will track fairly straight. Without it, it's a straight-up whitewater boat. So I was going sideways whenever I picked up any kind of speed. And this is where I paddled over to the opposite bank. There's a spot there I saw a little beach, little gravel bar I was able to get up on and get myself squared away. Everybody I talked to there was really friendly. Just a nice bunch of people. I wasn't one of the fastest boats on the river, but I also wasn't the slowest. I was just happy to be able to get out on the water and get out in the river again. My shoulder held up just fine. No real complaints. I was sore the next day, but nothing beyond what I normally would have been for the fact that I haven't really been on the water much and I haven't been paddling a whole lot. So there we go. Now I'm starting to get my gear squared away. Tried putting the skirt on at the front, but it didn't work out so well because I didn't have it hooked in the back, so then I had to fight with that. I did start catching a little bit of current and drifting, but it wasn't too terribly bad there. I was in a little bit of an eddy here, and it was fairly slack water anyway. There we go. Got the skirt popped on. I was kind of glad I didn't bring my neoprene skirt because that thing's a fight to get on and off. It's almost too big. It's almost too small, rather, for the boat's cockpit, for this particular boat's cockpit. I'd also thought about, considering it was going to be pouring down rain, bringing my my Piranha Shiva, but I'm kind of glad I didn't at the end. I was having a conversation with a couple of people in a tandem kayak. They were just checking on me to make sure I was okay and just describing my equipment malfunction. This little stretch was fairly straight and fairly wave and rapid free. The river itself was rising quickly. The night before, it had been at 2.8 feet. I think when we put in, it was probably about 3 feet. It was about 3.5 feet by the time we got to the takeout. So it was actually a really good level. You didn't get hung up a whole lot. I did find a rock in the middle of the river, but I was able to get over and around it without any issue. There's a lot of slate cliffs. I've never paddled this section of river before, so I wasn't really sure what to expect, but there's a lot of slate cliffs on either side of the river at various points. A ton of waterfalls, especially with all the rain. A lot of runoff creeks. It probably wouldn't have been there had it been not raining. There are some sections of some small whitewater sections. I mean, just angry class ones. Nothing crazy, but definitely some fun. I had actually clicked my GoPro onto time-lapse and thought I was shooting a time-lapse for quite a while when it turned out I was actually shooting video. There's one of the waterfalls coming up, and again, I apologize for the water spots on the lenses. I didn't realize how bad it was until I actually saw the video after the fact. That was the first little section of rapids. Those guys swam. The lady that just passed me had a squid for a hat. This is also the Mad Hatter's Race. It was originally founded by the Mad Hatter's Canoe Club about 30 years ago, and they said they give a prize for the most elaborate hat for the day. I hope this lady, I don't know who actually won it, but I hope this lady did. The squid on the head was just about perfect. These are another small series of wave trains. There was a fairly decent-sized wave train towards the end that I didn't get because my GoPro had died. There's another short series of wave trains. There were some just fun, playful sections. There was a couple of waves that I might have been able to surf, but at this level, I'm really not sure. There was a couple of little curlers that were decent size, but I don't know that they would have been big enough for me to actually actively surf them. Excuse the dog in the background. The other dog's outside barking, and she's decided that now she needs to bark at something. Oh, wait. I guess he came back in. So these are those slate cliffs I was talking about along the side. They are actually on both sides. This valley is fairly deep. I was not familiar with this area. I haven't really spent a whole lot of time in this part of the state. I'm not familiar with the river, and I'm not really familiar with the area itself. I had been up by the Harpersfield Covered Bridge, which isn't there at the moment. It's being rebuilt on the other side of the river. It's where Vicky and the kids went to watch, to film me when I took off and to watch, and then they paddled down to the takeout. It gets a little bit flatter here and there. Again, I didn't know. Well, one, I'd never paddled in this kind of rain before, so with the GoPro, and I didn't really know how to keep water off the lens. I figured that out now, but it doesn't help me then. So I actually lost quite a bit of footage when I got back and started looking at it. A good portion of it had just big water spots all over the front of the lens. This one's pretty bad. Unfortunately, I had to get rid of a lot of it. This one, it finally splashed off, and it's another one of the little splashy rapids that we came up through. There's a lot of bends. This river makes a lot of turns, and most of the turns had some small rapids in them, just little wave trains, nothing crazy. No major obstructions. They told us about a couple of strainers, trees that had fallen into the river. They said the one was halfway across the river. When I think halfway across the river, I think obstructing. Well, it was sticking out about maybe 5 feet into the river. Certainly would have been dangerous if you weren't expecting it, but it was easily avoidable. Everything out here was easily avoidable. There's more of these slate cliffs. And these bluffs, I said, were on either side of the river. You'll see them again at the takeout. Fairly large line of slate and shale that the river's cut back into. Waterfalls abound along them. We've got canoers that were smoking me. I got passed by quite a few canoes. Unfortunately, with a whitewater boat without the skeg, if I get going too fast, it just starts to spin. So, unfortunately, I could only go so fast, but I still made it down the river, and have decided that if I do this next year, I need a boat that tracks a little bit better. And I will say in the whitewater, it handled flawlessly, but there wasn't enough of it to really worry about too much. There's some nice little splashy wave trains here. Straight ahead is one of the reported strainers. It sticks out of the river a little bit, but it's easily avoidable to the left side of the river. And there's the rock that I almost hit, and there's another rock up here that I also almost hit. There's some definitely shallow spots in this piece of river. You can see by where the grass is actually growing in the river, how much it had come up, and it seems to come up. Looking at the gauges, this river comes up fairly quick and it goes down fairly quickly. It's another waterfall coming off the bluff to the left there. This river actually seems to come up really fast. As I said, by that evening, I checked the gauge and it was up to almost 8 feet, and then 2 days later, it was back down to about 2.5 feet when we hadn't had rain. I did manage to pass some kayakers, not many, but I did actually manage to pass a few, and a couple of girls on stand-up paddle boards. I managed to pass them, so I was pretty pleased that I could pass probably the slowest vessels on the river at the time. I hit about mile 2 and I was tired. I was really feeling it. I was in some pain, and then after that I kind of pushed through that little wall, and I felt pretty good after that. In fact, I was feeling, by the time I hit the takeout, I actually probably could have gone another couple of miles. I got into a rhythm and was actually feeling pretty good, so I was pretty happy about that. This guy in the wreck boat on the river left there, he actually had a waterproof Bluetooth speaker, so he was jamming out to some tunes while we were paddling. Another couple of guys in a canoe had one also. It's not a bad idea. But everybody I met on the river, everybody I talked to, the people I passed, the people that passed me, we maybe chat for a minute. Just very pleasant. very pleasant people. Everybody was super nice. Um, Everybody was just out having a good time in spite of the weather. I will say, everybody who completed this paddle definitely earned a finisher's medal for this. It was cold, it was wet, it was miserable, and the level and amount of equipment varied from everything from I saw people that were dressed like me in full dry suits with I had wetsuit gloves on, and I ended up putting a neoprene skull cap on to keep my head warm, all the way to people just wearing raincoats and that sort of thing, all the way to ended up seeing one girl towards the end that was wearing shorts and a t-shirt and looked like she was about to freeze to death. So the weather was definitely not conducive to dressing for summer weather. The water was only about 55 degrees at the time, and the air temperature was about 50. So it was definitely cold. I mean, I was fairly comfortable. I actually dressed in I was wearing shorts with a pair of just thin base layer leggings under my dry suit, socks, and I was wearing a wetsuit, like a half mil wetsuit shirt, and just a fleece under my dry suit. There's another waterfall coming up here. And like I said, there's a lot of sections of flat water here, and they were fairly smooth. Sometimes I'd really get into a rhythm and just start paddling really hard to see how much speed I could get up to, and then I'd be disappointed because I would have to start slowing down because the boat would start going sideways again. And I mean, that's the nature of the boat. These things aren't really designed for speed. They're designed to be maneuverable in whitewater. They are definitely not designed to go fast. Apologies again for the water spotting on the camera. I will endeavor to fix that on my next paddle adventure. Hopefully my next paddle adventure won't have as much rain either. But if it does, I'm okay with it. I was actually grinning like a madman about halfway through. I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed myself in spite of the weather. In fact, I might have enjoyed it more because of it. It actually made it kind of pretty out, and the waterfalls, you wouldn't have seen those if it hadn't have been raining, and the river level was just perfect. They actually, in the distance there, are the two stand-up paddle boarders. There's a bridge coming up also, and I told Vicky that if I do this again, and she's driving again, they could actually park by this bridge, and they can take pictures or just watch me go under. Hopefully, if I do this next year, it won't be raining, because Vicky and the kids both got pretty wet and cold soaked. Yeah, next year, if I do this again, I'm gonna see if I can find a more appropriate boat for a downriver long distance race. Preferably something with a keel, or just make sure my skeg's working, because I think that would have helped immensely. For those of you who don't know what a skeg is, it's in this case it's a fin that retracts in the back of the boat. In the case of this is a Jackson Rogue 10, the skeg is a spring loaded, and it's got a cable that attaches onto the side of the boat to a handle. It's almost like the bolt on a bolt-action rifle, where you just lift it up and the spring should engage to let it drop. But unfortunately, it's in a narrow well, so if it gets filled up with mud or rocks or dirt, then you will have a problem. Well, they had the mileage marked on parts of the river. This was an 8.5 mile race. I think I saw mile 2, mile 5, and maybe mile 7. I don't remember seeing the rest of them. They were just on white placards stuck on trees. Coming up to the bridge here, there's a couple of people from the park district on the bridge. This race is sponsored and put on by the Lake County Lake Metro Parks District. Very nice event. Really give a lot of credit to the volunteers who came out for this. They definitely braved the weather. They did a really nice job setting this up and organizing it, running it. I really think everybody did have a good time. Everybody seemed to enjoy it. Everybody looked happy. So coming up on another little series of small wave trains. And this little Class 1 stuff. Nothing crazy though. There are some fairly decent currents here. You watch along the outer edges, so you could definitely get caught up and flipped if you're not careful. I did do a ferry at one point. A lady got hung up on a sandbar and couldn't get off, so I ended up ferrying across, trying to work my way back up an eddy to help her, but she was able to get herself loose on her own. Had to actually use the whitewater boat, and I was pretty pleased. That was my first successful ferry, even though it wasn't a super strong current. It was still in current. Normally what happens is when I try to ferry, I end up just, my nose wraps and I end up doing a peel out. So I was happy about that, but it's definitely something I need to practice a little bit more. On the bank, you see that orange, that's actually somebody from the park district telling you to keep to the right because there's a tree in the river on river left coming up here. It didn't stick out very far, and it was, again, easily avoidable. There weren't any major hazards that couldn't be easily avoided by just staying on the opposite side of the river. A couple of islands that you had the options to split. The one actually had a decent wave train on the river right side of it. I didn't get that. Was after my GoPro died though, so I didn't get it on video. I was actually, as I was going around it, I was debating on whether to take the quick route or the what looked like the fun route. I ended up opting for the fun splashy route because at this point it was pretty clear to me by the number of people that had passed me that I was not going to finish top 10, top 20, probably not even top 30. So I may as well just have fun. Coming up to another little series of rapids. There's a nice little slackwater section, and then it drops off a little bit. Almost every bend in the river, it seemed like, had its own little wave trains. Again, nothing significant, but there was one wave I hit, and I hit it fairly dead on, that actually almost stopped me. So I was kind of surprised by that, but I mean, it wasn't anything I couldn't paddle through. There were definitely some shallow spots though, where some of these little headlands stuck out, and there's a grass sandbar there, mud bar with some grass on it there that I kind of skirted. We got a break in the rain about halfway through, and then it came right back. I was wearing a ball cap, and it was completely soaked. Fortunately, like I said, I had that neoprene skull cap on, and that definitely helped keep my head warm. Coming up here, this was a big waterfall. It's the road that runs parallel to it. It goes to the river. It goes under there's a culvert where it goes under the road. I was able to get sideways here and snap a couple of pictures of it. Well, at least pull a couple of pictures from the GoPro. I didn't actually have it take a photo. I didn't realize how low the battery was because this was about when the GoPro decided to die. But yeah, that was probably the biggest waterfall that I saw. These gentlemen here with there were definitely some interesting hats that came in. And the tandem kayaks were definitely a good idea. I was kind of envious of people having help paddling. Oh, anyway, Started making this curve, and this is about the time the GoPro died. It was about this time my GoPro died. This was about mile 7. I'd put my extra batteries in the dry hatch and couldn't get at them without getting out of the boat. So I missed some of the best rapids on the river, and I missed the end of the race. Since my GoPro had stopped working, the only thing I had left at this point was the video that Vicky shot while they were waiting at the takeout for me. So this was kind of a cool feature. You had to go wide around an island into a decent amount of current, and then work your way back into the takeout into a shallow area. There's a big eddy. It was fairly easy to get into. Kind of wanted to go play in the waves a little bit, but about this time I noticed Nick standing here by the park ranger in the orange jacket. So I was chatting with the park ranger. Well, there's our squid-headed lady. I didn't see her. Nick's like, run, 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 so I decided to jog to the finish line. At least pretend it's a race. I made it in one piece. Of course, my GoPro decides to die at mile 7. So, but this is the finish line. Kind of waiting to see what my time looks like.
We're working on the timing right now. There is an issue with the update from the start line to the finish line. So also this is just
this race went a lot better than I anticipated that it would. I was able to finish successfully. By the time I was done, I was pretty tired. Couldn't really carry the boat back. Ended up just setting it down and dragging it. But in the end, I was pretty happy. Had a lot of fun. Met some cool people, and was just glad I was able to get back in the river and do something I really enjoyed. Even though the weather was miserable, it was a really good time. I'll definitely do it again next year as long as there's enough openings. But I also want to say thank you to my support staff, my crew that got me to the river and met me at the end and cheered me on when they could. So I know they had a good time, even though they were wet and pretty well soaked. But thanks to my support crew, and thanks to everybody for watching. Hope we see you again on another video here before too much longer.